The first day Ethan Hayes set foot on the grounds of the North American Aerospace Defense Academy, he was confronted by an alpha who seemed to fill the entire corridor. The man was a wall of muscle and disdain. He barked out a question, his voice rough, wanting to know if Ethan was aware that this particular walkway was off-limits to Omegas. For a moment, a different voice echoed in Ethan's mind, one of frantic desperation. "Come on, Logan. You made a bet. You swore you wouldn't become some Omega's lapdog." Ethan lifted his gaze, his expression unreadable, and met the Alpha's stormy eyes. In a bizarre twist of fate, the imposing figure stumbled, his legs giving out from under him as if tripped by an invisible wire. He landed on both knees directly in front of Ethan. He looked up, his face still a mask of defiant arrogance. A sneer played on his lips. He muttered about how Omegas were always so full of cheap tricks. Yet, the silent voice screamed a different truth. Damn it. At this height, I'm perfectly positioned to lick his hand. Ethan's gaze dropped to the Alpha kneeling before him, the man whose mind was at war with his own instincts. A hint of frustration was still visible on his face. Logan bit out his words, informing Ethan that he couldn't use this path. He then lowered his voice, suggesting that Ethan take the trail behind the mountain. He explained that it was shadier and a shorter route. Ethan gave him a single, dismissive glance before turning away. He stated a simple "oh" and dragged his duffel bag in the opposite direction. The moment Ethan was gone, Logan's friends swarmed him, clapping him on the shoulder. They were impressed, marveling at how a single sentence had sent the Omega scurrying away. They admitted they had been worried he would waver. Logan's reply was icy and impatient. He dismissed Ethan as just another Omega, nothing he hadn't seen before. Later that night, a knock sounded on the door of Ethan's private dorm room. He opened it, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, to find a familiar face. Logan stood there, blushing and scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. He asked if Ethan, being new, needed any help with anything. Ethan, his voice husky with sleep, replied that he was already settled but thanked him for the offer. As he moved to close the door, Logan quickly blocked it. He pleaded with Ethan not to send him away, his voice dropping to a near whisper. He confessed that he was in his rut and asked if Ethan could just hold him. At the academy, an Alpha's rut was notoriously aggressive and difficult to manage. The presence of a calming Omega could make a significant difference. Ethan's hand paused on the doorknob. The air was thick with Logan's pheromones, an intoxicating scent of aged bourbon that was a well-known favorite among Omegas. It was designed to unravel their composure. It was hard to say if a sheen of moisture had gathered in Ethan's downcast eyes. He told Logan he could come closer. With permission granted, Logan eagerly wrapped his arms around Ethan's waist, burying his face in the crook of his neck and inhaling deeply. He lifted Ethan effortlessly, carrying him to the bed. He murmured about how perfect Omegas were, how wonderful. His mind, however, was singing a completely different tune. Oh God, he's blushing. It's too cute. Any Alpha who doesn't appreciate how adorable Omegas are is an idiot. Good. That means he's all mine. Ethan's voice was quiet when he asked why it seemed like no one there liked him. Logan, completely unaware that Ethan was responding to his thoughts, panicked. Words tumbled out of him as he explained that the campus forum was full of rumors that Ethan had gotten in through connections, and that the other Alphas looked down on him for being an Omega and were planning to drive him out. Ethan lowered his eyes, his voice laced with a fabricated sadness. He murmured that the military had only placed him at the academy because his Alpha had died in the line of duty. Logan wasn't even listening. He was too busy gently licking away the imaginary tears from Ethan's cheeks, telling him not to cry, that he was different. He insisted that they were cadets together and couldn't do things that would undermine unit cohesion. A second later, he froze, the words finally registering. He asked if Ethan already had an alpha. A beat of silence. Then he added flatly that it was good he died. His thoughts were far more brutal. Any alpha who would let such a beautiful Omega wander into another's hunting ground deserved to die, whoever he was. The weeks before the official start of term were dedicated to unified basic training for all cadets and instructors. As an Omega, Ethan felt the weight of unfriendly gazes from the majority of the alphas. He could overhear their hushed, malicious discussions as he passed. Their plans to teach the pretty little Omega a lesson, to show him that looks weren't enough to make it at the academy. As expected, on the first day of classes, another alpha blocked his path. He was tall, with a grim expression that marked him as a serious threat. He challenged Ethan to a fight, calling him a helpless little princess. Ethan calmly met his gaze. The next second, he threw a punch that landed squarely on the alpha's face. Caught off guard, the alpha stumbled backward and fell to the ground, his eyes wide with shock. Ethan extended a hand, a gentle, placid smile on his lips. He offered to help him to the med bay. The stunned alpha, Jax, took a moment to recover. He touched his fingers to the bloody cut on his face, his Adam's apple bobbing. He stammered that he was fine. Ethan nodded and turned to leave, but Jax grabbed his arm. Using his height advantage, he half-dragged, half-carried a protesting Ethan all the way to the infirmary. Jax, for the first time, seemed at a loss, gesturing wildly to the doctor. He explained that he was just trying to scare him, but then Ethan had just knocked him down with one punch. He pleaded with the doctor to check Ethan's hand, worried that the small creature might have broken a bone. Ethan looked on with a sense of helplessness, wanting to clarify that he was an Omega, not a fragile glass figurine. But he decided the misunderstanding could be useful. He asked Jax if he had an account for the campus forum. Surprised by the non sequitur, Jax confirmed he did. A small smile touched Ethan's lips as he asked to borrow it for a few days. Just as Jax handed over his login credentials, the doctor finished his examination and announced that there was nothing wrong with either of them, gruffly telling them to get back to class. Back at the training grounds, Ethan found a quiet staircase and opened the forum. The top trending post was a rant about him. The original poster complained that the new Omega didn't know his place, having dared to hit Jax. The comments were a mix of contempt for his supposed backdoor entry and threats to run him out of the academy. One user scoffed that an Omega was nothing, that not even a dog would want one. But then, the replies took a strange turn. Someone asked if they were really going to drive him out, musing on how cute the Omega was with his tear-filled eyes when he was in heat. A confused user asked for a translation. Another replied, explaining that the Omega, even when he was clearly uncomfortable, would still look up at you with a pained expression and apologize before quietly slipping away to the bathroom to take his suppressants. The thread then exploded with accusations. They were all hypocrites. One user declared that the Omega couldn't belong to just one person. He was their Omega. A new comment appeared, shifting the topic. Had anyone forgotten that he was a transfer student with a mysterious background? Another user claimed to have inside information from an uncle at the Pentagon. After some prodding, he revealed the secret. Ethan was the unclaimed Omega of a Major Vance, who had recently been killed on the battlefield. The name Vance was familiar. Someone else made the connection. It couldn't be the legendary Major Logan Vance, could it? The comments erupted again, this time with a new, feverish excitement. The idea that he was a widow only made him more desirable. Ethan silently closed the laptop. Nearby, two tall alphas were whispering to each other, wondering why the instructor for military tactics was late on the first day. A whistle blew, sharp and clear, silencing the cadets. They snapped into neat rows, but their instructor was nowhere to be seen. A restless energy began to bubble up through the ranks. A calm voice cut through the air from the second-floor balcony. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am your new special appointment mecha combat instructor, Instructor Hayes." A figure appeared, leaning against the railing. It was Ethan. He was casually toying with the instructor's whistle. "My ability is acoustic resonance." He looked down at the sea of shocked alpha faces, his expression devoid of emotion. "It's an honor to begin the new semester with you all." Silence. The kind of silence where a dropped pin would sound like a gunshot. The academy was an exclusive institution, and that exclusivity was the source of every cadet's pride. If the standards for students were high, the standards for instructors were astronomical. The initial shock gave way to a wave of excitement among the alphas. The thought of being taught by an Omega, and one who looked like Ethan, was thrilling. The idea of being disciplined by him, of a sharp rap from his whip, was enough to send their minds spinning. Their gazes shifted, becoming something more predatory. One bold alpha whistled suggestively. He called out, asking the instructor if he could challenge him. Ethan's gaze drifted down to him. He leaned against the railing, his lips barely moving as he asked if the cadet had a problem. The alpha, cupping his hands around his mouth, shouted back that he had no problem. He just wanted to spar with the instructor. Ethan nodded. He agreed. He walked down the stairs, the challenging alpha trotting ahead of him like an eager puppy seeking praise. The alpha asked what his chances were, what the odds were. Ethan glanced at his face, considered for a moment, and replied that it was 3-7. The challenger's eyes lit up. He asked if that meant he had a 70% chance of winning. Ethan arched an eyebrow, holding up 3 fingers. "No, I need 3 punches. You'll need 7 years. In a hospital bed." There were few training mechs available. The challenger had his own and quickly powered it up. Ethan, being new, had none. He scanned the hangar, his eyes landing on a gleaming, all-black mech tucked away in the farthest corner. As he approached it, a young maintenance technician rushed out to stop him, explaining that the mech belonged to Major Vance. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. He stated that he knew. He asked if there was a problem with him using his mate's property. The technician wiped a bead of non-existent sweat from his forehead, stammering that there was no problem, but that the Blackbird was too violent, not suitable for an Omega to pilot. He offered to find a more user-friendly model. Ethan cut him off. He said this one would do. Before the tech could protest further, Ethan had gracefully climbed into the cockpit of the mech known as Blackbird. The Blackbird was a top-tier S-class machine. Even the controls were made from premium alloys, studded with crystals that refracted the sunlight. Ethan slowly pulled off his black leather gloves, his gaze soft as he looked down at Logan's prized machine. The faint, unique scent of bourbon still clung to the air inside. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to the main console. Outside, everyone watched this quiet, intimate moment. The setting sun cast a warm glow, highlighting the thick, long lashes of the Omega. A wave of possessive desire washed over the crowd of alphas. A few of the less disciplined ones were immediately thrown into a premature rut and had to be dragged away by medics. The commotion drew cadets from neighboring training grounds, all eager to see the spectacle. Ethan settled into the pilot's seat, his hand resting on the controls. He spoke into his headset, his voice a low command. Begin. The battle started instantly. Ethan's fingers moved over the console with the familiarity of a reunion with an old friend. The blackbird responded flawlessly. His expression hardened as he launched the first attack. The crowd of onlookers grew, their roars of excitement echoing through the hangar. They cheered for the little Omega, urging him on. One young Alpha was so engrossed, he didn't notice a dark presence looming behind him. A deep, Yunchen-filled voice rumbled. "Had enough of a look? Is my mate pretty?" The cadet, his eyes glued to the fight, answered instinctively, "Gorgeous." Then the words registered. "My mate?" The sheer arrogance of the claim was staggering. He spun around, ready to challenge this stranger. "What do you mean, your mate? Instructor Hayes is our Omega." His eyes finally focused on the face of the man before him and the uniform he wore. His blood ran cold. Major Vance? But you're supposed to be dead." Logan Vance's eyes were dark, his brow arched. He asked the cadet in a dangerously soft voice if they were all that eager for him to die, just so they could inherit his beautiful mate. Inside the training area, Ethan executed a final, sweeping maneuver. The Challenger's mech collapsed, completely disabled. He powered down the Blackbird and disembarked, a strange silence falling over the crowd. They parted, creating a path. At the end of it stood a tall, imposing Alpha in a Major's uniform. He radiated an intimidating aura. Ethan walked towards him. As he drew near, the man stepped forward, blocking his way. Ethan tilted his head. He asked who he was. The Alpha was silent for a moment. Then a humorless smile stretched his lips. "The mech you were just using," he said, his voice a low growl, "is mine." Another obstacle. Ethan frowned, his mind racing. He instinctively tried to use his acoustic resonance ability to peek into the man's thoughts, but found only silence. This Alpha's mental fortitude was stronger than his own. He had to guess. He asked if his late mate had lent it to him. Logan let out a choked sound, something between a laugh and a scoff. He leaned in close, his breath warm against Ethan's ear, a current of ambiguous intimacy in the air. "Have you ever considered the possibility," he whispered, "that I am your mate?" Ethan's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before he quickly looked down, a mask of composure falling back into place. "Logan." His expression was calm, but his mind was a maelstrom. "He's back?" The brass said he charged in like an idiot and got himself blown to pieces. Not even enough left for a coffin. "He can't be back for the Blackbird, can he? My precious. I just got my hands on it." Suddenly, Logan spoke again, his voice flat. "I can hear you." Ethan looked up, confused. Logan's eyes were swirling with a turbulent emotion. "Unfortunately for you, my ability is also acoustic resonance." He slowly peeled off his own leather gloves, his voice devoid of emotion. "I heard you went to the Pentagon after you heard I was dead. I heard you told them how devoted you were to me, how you wanted to follow in my footsteps. Lying in a ditch half dead on some alien moon, I heard you, and I thought, I can't die. I have to crawl my way back from hell for that." He leaned in again, his voice dropping to a demonic whisper. "But now it seems you had other ideas. I'm not happy about that. Not at all. So, as for the Blackbird, don't even think about it. I take it to the grave with me before I let you have it. Let's see if you care enough about it to follow me there." The words were spoken loudly enough for those nearby to hear. A wave of shock rippled through the cadets. Their internal chatter was a chaotic symphony of disbelief and secondhand embarrassment that both Logan and Ethan could hear perfectly. Finally, Ethan's composure broke. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white, and looked up, his voice sharp. "Don't think for a second I need your damn mech, Vance." Of course he needed it. A machine like the Blackbird was a dream, but his pride would never let him admit it. That night, sleep wouldn't come. After curfew, Ethan slipped out, using his agility to navigate the Academy's security patrols. He found his way to the hangar and collapsed onto the Blackbird's console, pressing a kiss to its core before finally drifting off into an exhausted sleep. Hours later, a mournful sigh echoed beside the mech. "Hey buddy," Logan's voice lamented. "You think I was too harsh? I knocked on his door for 3 hours and he wouldn't answer. My mate might be gone for good. It'll just be you and me from now on, 2 bachelors." He leaned against the cockpit's viewport, ready to continue his monologue, when he saw Ethan's sleeping form inside. He froze. All pretense of rank and dignity vanished. He scrambled into the cockpit and gathered the sleeping Omega into his arms, covering his face with kisses. The rough, wet sensation of Logan's tongue woke Ethan. He frowned, whimpering in his sleep and clutching at Logan's uniform. "Blackbird." Logan's fingers toyed with a lock of Ethan's hair. He continued his teasing, his voice a low purr. "Not the Blackbird, but you can have something else." Half asleep, Ethan's legs instinctively wrapped around Logan's waist. He tilted his head and pressed a clumsy, sticky kiss to his cheek. "Don't want your thing," he mumbled. "Want my little bird." Logan tensed. Damn it. A man can't be called little, but he was born to be my mate. He wants the bird? Fine. It's just a machine. He carried Ethan to the pilot's seat, intertwining their fingers over the console to initiate a deep link protocol. He intended to act as a conduit to help Ethan's mind connect with the machine. The Blackbird, however, was unimpressed. A large red X flashed on the screen. The machine, accustomed to the highest grade mental energy, was rejecting the inferior input. But there was another way. Logan's face was a blank mask as he spoke to the machine. "I suggest you open a secondary administrative account for my mate right now. Don't make me slap you." The red X vanished, replaced by a green checkmark. A small text annotation appeared beside it, "Old man." Then, a pixelated middle finger flashed on the screen before disappearing. Logan ignored it. He scooped up Ethan, who was now clinging to him like a limpet, and walked out of the hangar. Ethan woke late the next morning. The first thing he saw was Logan, looking as proud as a peacock, his eyes bright with a satisfied energy. A faint bite mark, deliberately left visible, adorned the junction of his neck and collarbone. Ethan's own voice was a hoarse whisper when he asked why he was here. He remembered falling asleep with his precious mech. Logan's inner voice, now crystal clear to Ethan, boomed with smug satisfaction. "Because I was lucky enough to go out and pick up a mate. Thank you, universe." What he said aloud was different. "What do you mean? Last night you were all over me, kissing me, holding me, telling me how much you wanted my little bird. Now you're going to abandon both man and bird?" Ethan's face flushed. He pulled the covers over his head and turned his back to Logan, insisting he never said that, and telling him to stop talking about his little bird. Logan's eyes darkened. He murmured thoughtfully that it wasn't little at all. Ethan fled to his duties on the training field, a feeling of impending doom chasing him. He stood before the rows of panting alphas, ordering them to run more laps, while their thoughts washed over him. Is the instructor in a bad mood? Who pissed off our mate? God, he's beautiful even when he's angry. He tightened his grip on his whip, resisting the urge to strike them, knowing they'd probably enjoy it. Just then, a high-ranking officer approached. Ethan recognized him as General Miller, the man who had delivered the news of Logan's death. Miller's gaze fell not on Ethan's face, but on the gland on his neck, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Ethan frowned, wondering if there was a strange scent on him. He had been meticulous about scrubbing off any trace of Logan's pheromones. Miller's smile widened. He informed Ethan that there was no scent, but that Major Vance had just completed a tour of the academy, reeking of Ethan's heat. Until that moment, Miller had assumed Ethan would be the one to get bitten to shreds, but now he realized he had misunderstood their dynamic. Ethan stiffly changed the subject, asking why the general was here. Miller's expression turned serious. He explained that the Pentagon regretted the misinformation regarding Major Vance's survival, and that his family compensation would not be revoked. The military wanted to offer Ethan a satisfactory resolution. The general led him deep into a secure military facility. Behind 2 layers of reinforced doors, Logan sat with his back to them. He was shirtless, revealing a network of raw, ugly scars across his back. Hearing them enter, he quickly pulled on a shirt, his sharp gaze softening the moment he saw Ethan. Miller sighed, announcing that he had brought Ethan so Logan could explain things himself, and then discreetly left them alone. Logan explained that his death had been a ruse, a high-level covert operation to infiltrate the enemy's inner circle. The mission was top secret. Ethan looked at him, asking why he had returned to the academy then. He didn't believe it was for him. A man in Logan's position wouldn't let personal feelings derail a mission. Logan admitted the plan had been compromised. A mole had leaked information, and his superiors had ordered him back to find the traitor. Ethan was silent for a moment. He asked if Logan wasn't afraid that he was the mole. He reminded him that the most beautiful omegas were often the most deceptive. Logan's expression grew serious. He stared at Ethan, and then his eyes lit up with a completely different idea. His inner voice, loud and clear, reached Ethan. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? What's the spousal benefit package like? I should have just let myself get killed. If I can be a kept man, I don't want this stupid job anymore." A loud cough from the doorway reminded them they were not alone. General Miller stood there, fist to his mouth, telling them to at least acknowledge his existence. Logan glared at him, then turned back to Ethan. "Let me just take care of him and we can continue," he proposed. The general wisely made his exit. With Logan back to hunt a traitor, a grand public display was part of the strategy. Every afternoon, when Ethan finished instructing his class, he would hear a cadet shout that his boyfriend was here. And every day, Logan would be waiting. He would pull Ethan around a corner, press him against the wall, and kiss him desperately, complaining about the names the cadets called him. "The guy who stole our mate. The husband who can't keep his wife in line. The pathetic rival." It was, Ethan realized with some amusement, a plea for validation. He reminded Logan that he had already acknowledged him as his family. Logan, incredulous, asked when. Before Ethan could answer, Logan bit down hard on his neck, the sharp sting making him gasp. "The day I learned you had died," Ethan managed to say, his voice shaky, "I told General Miller I was your little widow. From that moment on, I was yours." Logan took him to the Blackbird to teach him its advanced systems. He stood behind Ethan, his body pressed close, his hands covering Ethan's on the controls. His voice was a hypnotic murmur of praise, each successful maneuver earning Ethan a kiss on the neck or a suggestive brush of his hand. Despite the suppressants, Ethan found himself tipping into an early heat. He lay pliant in Logan's arms, his eyes hazy with desire as Logan's hands and mouth roamed over him. But just as things were about to escalate, a sliver of clarity returned. He warned Logan that if he dared to soil the Blackbird, they were finished. Logan froze. He looked down, a wounded expression on his face. Ethan didn't look at him. He turned his head away, exposing his neck. "Take me to your quarters," he whispered. "Don't let anyone see." The mole was caught, another high-ranking officer with a generational grudge against the Vance family. But the damage was done. The enemy, sensing weakness, launched a full-scale attack. Logan had to return to the front. He didn't leave a permanent mark on Ethan that night, only a temporary one. He whispered that he wanted to make Ethan his completely, but he couldn't bear the thought of condemning him to a lifetime of suppressants if he didn't return. Ethan, in a moment of desperate passion, bit down on Logan's gland, wanting to mark him instead, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The gland of an alpha was hard and unyielding. He pulled back, frustrated, and simply told Logan to come back alive. With Logan gone, Ethan's life returned to a monotonous routine. The Blackbird's core was still under repair, and Logan had left it in his care. One day, news arrived that the core was finally fixed, but enemy blockades had cut off the supply lines to the front. The mech couldn't be delivered. Ethan walked into a top-level strategy meeting at the Pentagon, unannounced. He looked directly at the Supreme Commander and stated that he wanted to go to the front. The commander's aide tried to dismiss him, telling him an Omega had no place causing trouble at a time like this. Ethan's fists clenched. He replied that he could pilot the Blackbird. He had no proof, but in the days he'd spent with the mech, he'd felt it opening up to him, granting him permissions only its master should have. It was a gamble. At the mention of the Blackbird, the Supreme Commander finally looked up from his papers. He told Ethan that his little sparring match with a cadet was child's play. Ethan didn't argue. He placed the Blackbird's core unit on the table and laid his hand upon it. A brilliant violet light flowed from his fingers into the device. The room fell silent. "The Blackbird," Ethan stated calmly, "has granted me higher-level clearance." After a long, tense silence, the commander gave his assent. "Find him 2 men. Get him there." As Ethan reached the door, he paused and looked back. "Thank you for your trust," he said quietly. "Father." He dismissed his escort as soon as they were clear of the city. The Blackbird's navigation and defense systems were more than enough. As he neared the combat zone, the mech's proximity alarms blared. He looked up just in time to see another mech falling from the sky in a plume of smoke. Without thinking, he engaged the Blackbird's rescue cradle, positioning himself to catch the pilot who had ejected. The impact was brutal, nearly shattering the Blackbird's newly repaired hull. The pilot, unprotected, crashed into the cockpit, the force of the collision almost ripping them both apart. It was Logan, bloody and bruised, yet somehow able to joke that he must be truly dead this time, because he could smell his mate from 1,000 miles away. Ethan gritted his teeth, yelling at him to stop joking. An enemy missile was locked onto them. As he spoke, a missile streaked towards their tail section. Logan's expression turned to stone. In one swift motion, he pulled Ethan into the pilot's seat, his own bloody hands flying over the controls. He initiated the jettison sequence for the tail assembly. The damaged section broke away, throwing the Blackbird into an uncontrolled spin. They were plummeting through the atmosphere. Their chances of survival were less than 30%. But looking at the grim determination on Logan's face, Ethan felt a strange sense of calm. He leaned over and pressed a light kiss to Logan's cheek. Just before the final impact, Logan wrapped his arms around Ethan, shielding him with his body, and activated the Blackbird's last resort, the Phoenix Protocol. A blinding flash of light engulfed them. When the fire subsided, Ethan called out Logan's name. A hand gently stroked his hair. "I'm okay, baby. Don't cry." Logan looked down at him, a self-deprecating smile on his lips. He pulled Ethan into his arms, kissing his forehead, then his lips. "You lunatic," Ethan sobbed, his eyes wet. "The blackbird. Did you destroy it?" A metallic arm, scorched and blackened, rose beside them. A series of beeps and clicks filled the cockpit. A robotic voice translated. "Not dead. More beeps. Wife. Also. Want. Kiss. Kiss." The mechanical voice abruptly cut out. Ethan looked up to see Logan coldly shutting off the power source. He asked what the noises meant. Logan's lips curved into a roguish grin. He explained that the sounds meant the system was malfunctioning, and he turned it off to prevent further damage. Ethan accepted the explanation. Then he met Logan's burning gaze. "What is it?" he asked, a knot of apprehension forming in his stomach. Logan's tongue, the only part of him not covered in soot or blood, darted out to lick his cheek. "That promise you made, does it still stand?" "Mission report, wife. Successful return. Requesting approval for 7 days in a king-sized bed." Ethan met his hopeful, pleading eyes and coolly refused. Logan's entire demeanor deflated. Then Ethan added that he had a villa in the mountains. They could only go there. Logan's eyes lit up like a supernova. As Ethan was momentarily distracted by their brilliance, Logan took his chance, sinking his teeth into Ethan's neck, a flood of possessive pheromones washing through him. He growled against his ear, each word a promise and a brand. "You're mine, Ethan. You are always, always mine."